come a little closer and lend me your ears. Don't worry, you keep yours while I keep mine.
In each episode, we'll dig into the major stories, uncover the truth, and retrieve gems from Yada's blog.
We'll discuss what's right, bark about what's wrong, wag our tails at the thrill of discovery, and take you on adventures through the exciting world we live in today. So, fasten your curiosity leash and get ready. Right then, coming to you with another episode of the Yada's Vlog on a Blog. Tomorrow's news, disseminated today. Let's dive in.
Well, welcome to the Vlog on the Vlog. We had a last-minute Wookiee that wanted to come up here to enjoy the show. Good to see you, Kevin. It's a pleasure to be back doing the show. We're on our second episode of the Quickie Vlog on the Blog. A Vlog on the Blog is where we go to a blog postings, which are typically just images and a quickie message. You know, most people today don't want to read more than about 10 words, but they'll sit and watch something. So we're doing a video on our blog entries, and on our new quickie daily vlog on the vlog, we're devoting 15 minutes to Torah topics and 15 minutes to things in the news. So you had requested a return to the golden ticket to those who get to be valued as much as the gold was from Ophir. And
yes,
I'm rather pleased that you did, Kevin. You know why?
I do. Go ahead.
I goofed.
It was a gut punch for me when you said that there could possibly, metaphorically speaking, be two people returning into Eden. That was a little gut punch for me. I was like, "Whoa, let's."
What happens is that, you know, when I'm doing my translation and writing now, we're going back and forth into either working on the website or doing vlogs. So there's lots and lots of distractions along the way, and. So I had done the math to calibrate the difference between kilograms and pounds, and what I was left with was just the pounds, as opposed to the multiplication of the pounds by the conversion into talents. And so I had not completed the mathematical equation, and that's typically what I rely on Mike Beati to do, who will join us this evening on Family Hour. Mike is the one when finds when I've just gone too quickly through the material, and I'm now spoiled because I know that I don't really have to go back. He'll find it. And so anyway, we're dealing with an unedited book. So here's the bottom line on it. And I'm going to read the passage again, and we can talk more about specifically what it means. God says, "I will make mortal man as rare, genuinely as scarce, and yet as beloved, valuable, and cherished, as refined gold, the gold of Ophir." And this is so mortal man's going to be equated to the gold from Ophir. So in the past presentation, I talked about total world amounts of gold that have been refined worldwide. And I've shared a document with you that gives you the mathematical extension on that, as well as the specific prophetic reference. And so since this is a quickie program, I'm going to just go right to the specific prophetic reference.
Sure.
The Torah and prophets tell us, and the writings tell us that David accumulated 3,000 talents of gold for the house for Yahweh's name. Now, since we're told that specifically in the testimony that Yahweh had inspired and kept for our record, and we're told that that gold was accumulated by his beloved son, and since it was for his the house for his name, which is the covenant home, since it came from Israel and it was specifically designated as refined gold from Ophir, we'd have to be foolish to say, let's not use that as the reference.
It's just a metaphor. People are just going to be precious, right? No.
I don't think so. I think it is specific, and I think that we have to go to the reference that God has already provided. Yahweh speaking through Yeshayahu circa 750 BCE. Dode would have accumulated this gold circa 1000 BCE. It's about a 2.5 century gap between the two of them. And we're told specifically how much gold that Dode brought in from specifically Ophir, 3,000 talents. And we know that Solomon brought in another 300 and I think it was 300 or 450 was the total from Solomon. Of course, being Solomon, we're not told what it was for. It might have been for his accumulation of wives and girlfriends, for all we know. But nobody told us specifically what it was for. But it's still gold from Ophir. Therefore, we know that a talent, in terms of a unit of measure, is between 70 and 77 pounds. So if you do the math and you multiply, let's go big, right? Go big. If you do the math and you multiply the 3,450 talents of gold by the equivalent in pounds, and then you divide that by the average weight of a Israelite today, an Israelite, or an American, where this is where most Jews live and where most Gentiles are living that are going to hear this message. And you'd be surprised, back in the day, I was a pilot, and I was doing my weight and balance calculations. We were always told to use 150 pounds as the average weight of an adult. Yeah, it's not so much anymore. It's 185.
Right.
Yeah, the average weight men in America are packing in between 195 and 200 pounds, and women at 175. And so the average is 185 in Israel and 185 in America, same number. You do the math, and it's 1,400 people. And then you realize that God has told us that there's going to be Yisraelites and there's going to be Goyim, who are going to be both mortals, because it began with Enosh, and then it went to Adam. So Adam would be descendants of Dode in terms of more associated with Dode, because Dode was Adam. And Enosh is just mortal men. And so since we're told we're going to have both, you have to put both in the calculation. So now you have 1,400, and you have to divide them among Goyim and Yisraelites. But God through Yeshayahu in the 17th chapter, this is the 13th chapter, God's going to give you the formula for making this division.
Yeah.
He told us in the 17th chapter that left behind on Teruah and protected within the crag are 2 or 3 from the uppermost branch, that would be Yehudim, and 4 or 5 from the branches that have been cut away, that would be Yisraelites. So if you take the high and low number of each of those 2, it's 7, multiple of 7. And so it's Yah's favorite number. It's 700 Yisraelites that'll be part of that mortal remnant, and 700 Goyim.
Wow. That's
not including covenant members. Yeah,
right.
8 billion people, 8 billion people down to 1,400.
Right. It's right in line with what we know from the statements on stone. My chesed is for thousands.
Among millions. Yeah, it's for thousands. So 1,000 among billions would be 1 in a million. So that's the number. 700 Yisraelites, 700 Goyim among the mortal remnant. Now, there's another class of people, covenant, already previously empowered.
Standing grain, yeah.
Yeah, I think, unless I am missing something here, that by the criteria that Yahweh is establishing of not only accepting the terms and conditions of the covenant, attending the Moed Mikra as delineated, but demonstrating that they are observant, responsive, thoughtful, and trustworthy. That's be trustworthy. That means you've got to be engaged doing what God wants done, and you have to, on occasion, make mistakes that you're able to correct and grow from, and stumble and fall and get back up and go again. So you put all that together, and I'm looking at who's making contributions and the like. I would not be surprised at all if this Shabuw'ah harvest was a multiple of the 8 individuals that are so synonymous with it, and therefore 80.
Right.
You're going to meet all of God's criterion for being empowered. I think it's probably around 80.
Yeah.
And then, a gleaning does not have to necessarily be a smaller harvest. It's a more challenging harvest. You got to work much harder at the gleaning. That's and so the gleaning that takes place on Teruah before the mortal remnant would therefore represent, I think, 10 times what we're going to see on Shabuw'ah. So if this is 80, 800, I mean, imagine it, we're essentially cheating come Teruah. We've got a banner that's like above our heads. The Dome of the Rock and Alaska Mosque have gone poof. The Temple Mount
greatest show on earth.
Purged.
Yeah.
There's no more religious trespassing on it. The tent of the restoring witness has been reestablished there. We have moved the Ark of the Covenant there. We have displayed the tablets of stone. We've had all manner of people try to kill. Eliah has come back from being gone for 2,770 some odd years. I'm back there supporting him, as we've written all these books about. Some people are trying to kill us, and we're impervious. Our message is broadcast in every language throughout the earth. At that point, there's a lot going on. And so if you miss it, shame on you, right? Right. And the world's of fire. Right. The world's of fire. At that point, it's obvious that Donald Trump is Satan. You can choose him if you want to stay religious. That's your pick. It's obvious that the world is falling apart. 2 out of every 3 Jews will have died in this 7-year period of the time of Israel's troubles. At that point, you can ignore it, but boy, that is your own damn fault. Yeah, so I was interested. I was interested in understanding, what the after the Shabuw'ah harvest, what the covenant family's job is in Sukah. We are essentially, for lack of a better word, lowy at that point. And so I would be interested in the numbers of lowy that for Yisra'el when the whole system was set up. Outside of Chorub and everything, because it was Moshe's family, right? How many of the lower they were as a percentage of the 1,000,000 or 600, Israelites there were? Yeah. How many lowy did it take to do that? Yeah. Yeah. It's kind of, it's an interesting analysis, because it's not just 12, one of 12 tribes being the lowy, because you had one of the sons becomes is not counted as a tribe anymore, Joseph, and it's divided into 2, and they don't often talk even about the Lowy, because they had a different role altogether. And then by the time of the Maccabees, and probably before that, there was a lot of infighting in Israel, because the religious, ultra religious among Israel, like today, realized there's a lot of money in religion, and they fought over who was going to have the roles of priests, as opposed to Yahweh's philosophy. The priests get paid no money, and they can't own land, and the job is inherited. They wanted the job. Yeah. We have terrible echo. Yes. Yeah, Rich, did that take care of the echo? Okay, so let's see if we can go forward here. But anyway, no, we have serious sound problems.
No, you're good.
Okay, so we don't know what percentage they really were of the total, but the covenant members who are going to oversee the millennial celebration of Sukah on behalf of the mortal remnants. We're guides, we're teachers, we're exemplars, we are administrators, we're all of those kinds of things. God does not like to intervene overwhelmingly. He likes to work through men of his and women of his choosing. And so that is the role that we're going to play. And these 700 Yisraelites, and eventually, after they've demonstrated themselves to be worthy, the 700 Goyim will have the opportunity to become covenant. But God's allowed 1,000 years for that to occur. And of course, during that 1,000 years, they're going to be productive. They'll be able to conceive children. And so we could end up with a lot more than 1,400 additional covenant members because of procreation. And we could end up with a lot less because God's not going to change the criterion.
Right. Yeah, it's a nice, I don't know how to put this, nest egg that Yahweh is giving to Dode for Eden and for his wedding gift, you know. A starter group of
Family.
people that are
Yes.
definitely Shazak, you know.
Mm-hmm.
As
So anyway, I think
opposed
that's
to
that's the numbers. Now, you also wanted to talk a little bit about carbon. Did you have a chance to read what I had further researched on how rare carbon is? Because we are a
did.
carbon-based life form. Carbon is a lot more prevalent, obviously, than gold. Gold can only be created in the supernova explosion of a massive star at its death. But carbon is a weird element.
Absolutely, to only be able to be in the red dwarfs. I mean, a 2,500 chance of the atoms to be correctly, and to have the I forget, it was a beryllium or something,
Yes,
atom in proximity.
Yeah.
In proximity. I mean, it was like,
Yeah.
wow. No wonder the universe is so big.
Yeah, it's actually a red giant, not a red dwarf. Red dwarfs are very
Red
common. Red
Right.
giants are very uncommon. Red giant is the last 1% of the death throes of a star that can be anywhere from 1/3 the size of our sun to 8 times the size of our sun. A star in that range, when it dies very rapidly. And that 1% of its life is during the period that it can be considered a red giant. And even then, it appears to be only clusters of red giants that this magic appears. And it is, man, if there ever was alchemy, this is it. Carbon has to go by route of beryllium-8, but beryllium-8. So, you finally get to the stage of a star where it's burned through all of its hydrogen, because a star fights gravity by nuclear explosions, nuclear fusion, and it's fusing hydrogen atoms into helium. But a star eventually runs out of that fuel. When it runs out of that fuel, it can no longer fight back against the enormous gravity, and the star begins to collapse. And under tremendous pressure, it generates astronomical levels of heat. And these are numbers that are so far greater than what is experienced in our sun, for example. So it's only under these very unique situations that this transitory molecule called beryllium-8 is created. But beryllium-8 doesn't stick around very long. The half-life of beryllium-8 is 10 to the minus 16th of a second. That's 15 zeros. After the 0 point, it's 16 zeros before you get to the 1. And that fraction of a second is how long beryllium-8 lasts in these very rare cores of dying red giant stars. And during that brief 1 to the minus 16th of a second, it must engage with a very specific molecule. That molecule not only needs to find it, hit it, but fuse with it. And even when you have this brief love affair, sparks fly. During this minus 1 to the 16th of a second, and they find each other and they fall in love and they merge together. The divorce rate's really high. It's only
Surprise.
1 in every 1,200 of these marriages that survives that nanosecond. And it's only the survivors that become carbon.
Carbon, right.
Oh, yeah. So it's what Hoyle did is he worked backwards. He says, okay, we're a carbon-based life form, so carbon has to exist, and we find there's a lot of it in this world. So we have to find the resonance that made it possible. And so he worked backwards, and so it's anthropomorphic to an extreme. It says, we were designed to create this in those circumstances, but that's how carbon comes to be. And without carbon, there is no life. And that is because carbon uniquely enables 4 very strong and effective bonds. And those 4 bonds are essential to life.
Yeah. So what you're saying is the song was right. We are stardust and we are golden. That's what this show's about.
That is right. We are stardust and we are golden. So that is our Torah moment for today. Well, let's talk about some items in the news. I don't see a timer here today. Oh, you may have one, and it's the bottom of my screen is completely cut off. So I only see you about nose high, and I've lost a significant part of the screen. So you may have the timer. I just can't see it anymore.
Yeah. Okay. We're at 9:44, so we're good.
Okay. All right. So here's the first. I mentioned in the last program, and it's really significant when you become an expert in the prophets. And I've spent every waking moment for 25 years studying them and writing about them. There we go. Now, and if you get just a touch higher, that'd be great too, because now I've got you chin. There we go. Okay, I can at least see you. Thank you. By studying the prophets, I would dare say that I was the first to actually unveil the meaning of Daniel, come up with the timelines involved and who was going to do what to whom, and correctly identified Donald Trump as the corporeal manifestation of Satan, the great betrayer. He is called Rahab in the Mizmor and in the prophets, particularly in Isaiah. So we identify Trump as the person that Christians would refer to as their Antichrist, and proved it. But, taking a POS like this that is nearly 80 years old, that is falling apart, that everybody thinks has dementia and is in fighting demons, and to say that he is going to survive over the next 7 years so that the events, that would have been 8 years at the time, the events can all play out around him and no one's going to actually be able to kill him. But that's a major limb. What were the odds that this POS is going to live at that point another 8 years and stay in power all of that time?
Right. Yeah.
And so it was an amazing and risky deduction from the prophets. But nonetheless, we did over 30 shows called The Antichrist, proving it. And telling everyone this is how we came to deduce this information. Well, with every day, Donald Trump proves that we're right.
Doesn't
and
he?
The last 24 hours, the news is ubiquitous with insiders when they're having conversations with Donald Trump, listening to Donald Trump saying that he is the greatest and most powerful person to ever lived.
Wow. This is far and beyond the simple thorn in the side of Paul, isn't it? This is as you like to say, the full McGillicuddy.
McGillicuddy. Yeah, it is and it isn't. Paul referred to his demon possession. Paul admitted he was demon possessed. Tucker Carlson, by the way, admitted that he was demon possessed for somebody of modern age. We know that Donald Trump is demon possessed. Muhammad admitted he was demon possessed. Paul said that his ego was so out of control that without demon possession, he was unmanageable. And so Paul was ego, where he claimed to be the God's lone apostle for the entire world. I would say that's pretty much like Donald Trump, where he said that if you listen to any other gospel, even if that gospel comes directly out of heaven, you're condemned. It's only mine. Mm-hmm. Yeah, you'd have to say that that's up there with the Donald Trump. So I don't think there's much of a difference between Paul and Donald Trump. In fact, you go back 20 years ago, I had deduced that Paul was the model for the person that Christians view as the Antichrist. He's the one who created the fraud that is Christ. So yeah, he's the model for it. He was demon possessed, and he had the very, very similar ego. Paul also admitted that he was a sexual pervert. He said that he would not have known he was a sexual pervert had it not been from the Torah. So the Torah called him a sexual pervert. And the Torah doesn't say much about sexuality. So for you to come to the conclusion that the Torah calls you a sexual pervert, you really have to be into some wild stuff.
Right.
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah. So he bad dude, and I don't think anyone in modern times prior to Trump had an ego as belligerent and caustic as did Paul, but Trump now does, and Trump is now saying that he is the most powerful person to have ever lived.
Yeah, Paul is limited. Paul's the slow play. Okay, this whole development of Christianity and how other societies take Christianity and use it to create the beast of Rome and all this sort of thing. Paul's the slow play. Paul himself he didn't even have a house, right? He never had any power. He roamed around. I mean, supposedly he talked about meeting all these kings and whatever, but it's never recorded. Yeah, but Trump is in a position to destroy civilization. Yes,
and will.
I mean, and will. Yeah,
I've said things that might seem crazy, but I've said that 7 years from now, Trump will go down as the single worst person who ever lived. Mm-hmm. He's going to be worse than Adolf Hitler, Mao Zedong, Stalin, Genghis and Kublai Khan, Tamerlane, Hadrian, Vespasian, Titus. You take the worst people from all of history. This man, Donald Trump, is going to be the worst person who ever lived. The most deadly, destructive, diabolical, demeaning, deceitful, and damning.
Yeah.
And it's just
interesting times.
Yeah, it's not amazing to us, but it should be to the world that the person known as the Antichrist was elected and is promoted by Christians.
Yeah. Isn't that the kicker? Isn't that the if ever there was a Christianity is satanic, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, by Satan, because all religions are. That's the whole point of Babel, right? If ever there was a proof statement for that, it is absolutely what we're witnessing in the Christian and MAGA amalgamation of their love and support for Donald Trump. No matter what he does, and he knows it. He is on record saying, I could shoot a guy in Times Square and get away with it. Mm-hmm. They would still love me.
He's going to lose the elections if they're even held in the midterm. He may create social chaos such they can't be held. But if they are held, he's not going to allow anybody to come in and impeach him. He's scared to death of that. And he is not going to hold national elections 2 years hence from there. And so you're looking at the man who will destroy America. And once he does, he's going to Jerusalem, which is Israel's the only place that actually has a majority of people that like the man. And God, isn't it just so typical of Jews to turn down God and revere Satan?
Yeah. For the religious and the political Jews, absolutely, it is exactly what they're doing.
And the timing of all this is the 29th of January of 2030 is when he arrives in Jerusalem, and he declares that he is a god on the Ides of March in 2030. And then he is challenged by the two witnesses beginning on Passover, which I think is the 18th of April in 2030, over that next 3.5 years. And he can't be killed. So all of you who are trying to assassinate him, that's not going to work because he is demon possessed by Satan himself. He can be tormented for recompense prior to going to Sheol, hell, but his eternity will be spent in hell. There's nothing that can change that. And so it's eternal incarceration. And, I'm his last kill. That's the irony of the whole story. So the man that figured out who he was is his last kill. And that kill is so ruthless. And it's what God does with it, and people's response to it after hearing the two witnesses speak on behalf of Israel and to show that they're impervious to death. And then to set all that aside and allow this piece of crap here to bludgeon me to death brutally. It's the final trigger that causes those 700 plus 700 golden tickets.
Right. It simply amazes me that, because we know that Shabuw'ah this year, Jacob's troubles, right? And we know that part of that is a two-state solution. So not only does Trump sell out Yisra'el, okay, they still take him in. They still allow him to be able to go and say that in their land, say that he is, he is God, make his statement and everything. It's
second coming of Cyrus. They're looking for an anointed. Cyrus was the person that Yahweh identified centuries before his birth as one that he would anoint. No, he didn't actually anoint him, but he just calls him my chosen implement for this. For this particular purpose. There's only one person that God actually says that I personally anointed with my personal anointing oil, and then had
3 times.
Had him anointed on his instructions 3 times. So 1 by God himself, 3 by men, and that's Dode. They're just a reference to I'm setting this person apart to do this. Now Cyrus never became anything other than a pagan money-grubbing scumbag, but he did this one act that caused the promulgation of Jews again as an independent nation, even if only briefly, so they could go back and rebuild the temple and reestablish Jerusalem, all to become jerks again, turn on God again, and be pummeled by the Greeks after that, then the Romans, and then the Romans, and then the Romans, and then after the Romans, the Byzantines, and then the Roman Catholics, and then the first Muslims, and then the Ottoman Muslims, and on and on it goes after that.
Yeah, the Fourth Reich Romans again. So the Third Reich Romans.
They got the Third Reich Romans, and now they're going to have the Fourth Reich Romans. And make no mistake, the only reason the Holocaust happened is because of Christianity. Had it not been for Christianity, the Holocaust would have not been possible. And so when people around the world get all upset that Jews are not particularly thrilled with Christianity, understand the Christian New Testament lies and said that Jews killed their man God. Now, first of all, God's not a man. Men cannot kill God, but that's nonetheless what the Christian New Testament claims, is that this man God was killed by Jews so that God hates Jews. And as a result of that, anti-Semitism became so egregious that Jews were treated as demonic and as subhuman around the world. And so the rise of anti-Semitism around the world that caused all of the shuttles and all of the subjugation, the horrid treatment of Jews by the Roman Catholic Church, and then throughout Roman Catholic influenced Europe, and then in the Europe of the 1920s and 1930s that led to the Holocaust, all of that was directly attributable to Christianity. Although the Holocaust on its death count got an able assist from the top Muslim of the time, where the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem told Hitler, "Yeah, I get why you want to hunt them down, rob them, and turn them into forced laborers as slaves to make stuff. But don't you dare think that you're going to exile them. You need to execute them." And that whole concept, we can do a show on it one of these days, on the transition from exiling Jews to exterminating them, was all directly related to the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem, who I would also put, and sometimes I forget to mention him, I'd put in my all-time bottom 10 worst humans who ever lived list. But Trump will be worse.
Yeah. The Mufti will get his time on the Temple Mount in front of us, so he'll get his few minutes that we'll get to. I think Alma takes care of that, doesn't she? She'll probably be the one that that takes care of the Mufti.
Yeah, I think so. She plays
she would choose one.
She's gonna take that boy down. She's written some spectacular songs. That the one, as soon as he gets some graphics, there's two of them. Mr. Babylon was a song that was written in reggae form that is absolutely out of this world, spectacular. That's one of the graphics for it there. That is full of shiticus. Donald full of shiticus. Mr. Babylon. There is a really, really funny song that they're doing the animation and graphics for right now. And then they'll do one for Star Spangled Cosplay, which is also about how Satan is disguised as Donald Trump and disguised in religion. And it is beyond imagination funny. So these will be new songs that we'll have published before too long. Up there, one of the things you passed, and I know we're already past the 30-minute mark.
We started early though, so you know.
Yeah, that's true. So we borrowed some time. Let's go up to Tucker. That one right there. That was Tucker. No, you're right there. I think that was TC and Tucker. Tucker has does a show, and he'll have almost 60 million views. Now, that's an indictment on the condition of humanity. Mm-hmm. Carlson Tucker described vividly his demon possession.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, vividly described his own demon possession. He is bribed by the Qataris. So he is bribed by Muslims. He claims to be a Christian. He's demon possessed. He's a raging anti-Semite. And he has 60 million people who view his podcasts on X and Facebook, but primarily on X.
That is a dog whistle's not a show. That is a shofar to Jews out there that it's time to become Yehudim. Okay,
it is.
I mean, it is to Yada Yahweh, because that's the only way you're getting out of this, folks. I mean,
when you have a former, he's still a MAGA. He's just he's anti-Trump. So it's hard to imagine, but he's an anti-Trump MAGA now that is demon possessed by his own admission and Qatari bribed, Muslim bribed, and a raging anti-Semite to the tune of just being moronic. And he has an audience of 60 million people when he does a podcast. It just says that it's going to take some unbelievably hard work for us to have 700 Jews survive as the Mormons.
Left. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, this is not a lay down hand. This is really going to be tough. Right. And 700 Goyim that are not affected by all this trash.
Yeah, I'm gonna lean on Yahweh. I'm gonna put a little of that. Like you said, it's not a lay down hand. I'm gonna do my part, but at the end of the day, it's shake and bake. I'm gonna have Yahweh do his part too. Yeah, and he's got a little bit more power than
Yes.
I do. So,
Yeah. But the bottom line is that God can only do so much,
mhm.
and we can only do so much.
Oh, within free
It-
will, absolutely. I mean, but
absolutely,
yeah,
it's up to the people, and in particular, Jews haven't been receptive to God ever. I mean,
no,
ever. In terms of a people, of a nation, of an ethnicity, they have never been receptive to God.
right.
They were not
To walk into,
receptive. Right. They were not receptive to God when the first family, if you will. I mean, there were huge issues between Abraham, Sarah, and Hagar, and
mhm,
Ishmael and Ishak. Huge issues then again between Rebecca, Ishak, Esau, and Jacob. Jacob had all sorts of problems, and his issues with Leah were disgusting, and his
mhm,
affinity for Rebecca, who was disgusting, is also disgusting. And he gives these 12 boys life, and the first thing they do is reprehensible, and then it gets worse from there. I mean,
yeah,
they encourage a bunch of people to be circumcised to be part of the covenant, and then while they're trying to recover, they go kill them. Talk about despicable. God,
yeah,
what scum! I mean, what a low blow that one is. And then they sell their own
right.
brother into slavery. I mean, come on.
Uh-huh.
They finally get into slavery, and they have a fellow Jew says, I'm going to step in the way between you and the taskmaster to try to save you from the taskmaster. And rather than thanking him, they turn on him and spit in his
Right.
face. He tries to save them, and it must be 100 times during the Exodus they turn on Moshe and try to condemn him and stone him to death. No, this is a family that has never gotten along with God, and even the most important of them, Dode. And look at Dode's life. He got so sideways with God. There was a significant period of time they weren't even talking.
Time out. Yeah.
Yeah, man, it was time out for bad behavior. So. Jews it's going to be tough to find 700 of them, but that's how many the sacrifice of the red heifer, the Adamah Parah, is going to resolve, and 700 goyim at the time that are going to go into the millennial Shabbat, and well, I think the Jews will be living in Israel, and I think the goyim can be living throughout the world, but I don't see any reason for God to not continue the Yobel. So after 50 years, there has to be a reset. So
Right.
all of those goyim who have performed well as workers have to be set free.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
so while they start just lucky to be alive, and the workers during this time where the Jews become the learners, after 50 years is nothing compared to 1,000, right?
Oh, absolutely. And I
And
think that it also helps with our sensibilities of how we view slavery, or this idea of slavery now, as opposed to how slavery was viewed back then. It is along our lines of sensibilities with the 50 years that I don't want slaves, you know? I don't want people to do stuff, but when it's for their own good, so that they can be trained that this is, the way things are done. This is, then it
yeah,
makes sense.
I think that's listen, I would have agreed with you completely and said I prefer to do things myself, and the idea of even servants doesn't appeal to me. But then when you change a bit and you say, I've got responsibility, and we're going to have responsibility, and we can't be responsible for doing the little things
Right.
and managing all things and being productive apart from what we're doing, if we're going to be productive doing what we're doing. And so you're going to
Right.
have support. And the second aspect that I want to share is that if you view work as a pejorative, then you're not going to be part of this group, because everybody
Right.
works, or you won't survive a day if you're not willing to work. So
Absolutely.
everybody works, or you don't continue. That's the big issue. Adam didn't work, which is why he was tossed out of the garden, so that he would work. That's what God said. This is what you're going to be doing. It's going to be work, and it's going to be hard, and you got to learn from it. The third part of that is that God has to be fair. Goyim have abused and enslaved Jews for 3,000 years.
Yeah.
And so there has to be recompense for that. And God says there will be. And without some differentiation and some recompense, God can't be fair. And then lastly is if you look at the alternative, that 1,400 people represent all of those who are saved from being extinguished as from humanity for being too religious, too political, to be salvaged. This is very much like 8 on the ark versus all of the Nephilim around what was Eden in the Black Sea, Caspian Sea area. Very much the same kind of thing. 8 to however many there were then versus 1,400 versus 8 billion now. So they're going to be the fortunate with the golden ticket. And lastly, not second to lastly, the conditions are going to be spectacular. God's returning the earth to the conditions of Eden. You're going to look out and everybody's going to have a view that'll be much prettier than the one that is behind me. And most importantly of all, somebody that gets to work for Kevin in that time, doing what you're going to be doing, is an exceedingly fortunate individual.
Sure.
You are not going to be abusive. You're not going to have to say, that I would like to encourage you to do this, or let me motivate you to do this. You're going to say, I want this done.
Right.
And you're going to say how I want this done. And you're going to expect that it will be done that way. But the job will be beneficial for everyone. And you're going to be nice about it. And if they do good work, you're going to acknowledge that this work was good. And if it can be improved, you'll talk about how it can be improved. You're going to be a delight to work for.
Right.
Right. And if somebody says, I don't want to do this anymore, fine, goodbye. That's easy.
Right.
Next.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I don't know who would in any way, shape, or form pass up the opportunity of a lifetime, of a life's time to be in Yahweh's presence at de minimis, the absolute minimum to be in Yahweh's presence. Who wouldn't give everything they have right now at this moment for such a thing, right?
Yes. Now, I don't think that the average mortal, Goyim or Yehudim, mortal, is actually going to be in Yahweh's presence. I think Yahweh will project an aspect of his presence into this world. But to be in Yahweh's presence, you're going to have to be covenant. You're going to have to be able to shed the physicality of a body and transition into the 7th dimension to actually be in Yahweh's presence. And that the mortal remnant, we are extensions of Yahweh's presence as exemplars for them. And there will be, a glowing fire and a booming voice on occasion. But I don't think when we say camping out with Yahweh, the covenant members will be. But non-covenant, the mortals, they're going to know of his existence in a very real way. They're going to see fiery light and hear a voice, and they're going to see it in us. That, I have talked to Rich about what about the possibility of God when he harvests his most important managers for this time on Shabuw'ah? What if we have the opportunity to not spend all of our time in Shamaim in that 3.5 years? What if we can opt for time here so that we spend 2 days, 1 day recharging, 1 day learning there over that 3.5 years of each week, and 5 days down here doing what we're doing?
Right.
continuing to share, continuing to encourage people through this horrible time, continuing to direct people's attention to yada yada, I would think that would be a very productive way for us to work and for God to deploy us.
Oh, absolutely. I would take that work week. I'd take that ticket. No problem
I'd
at
take
all.
that ticket. Oh, absolutely. In
Yeah.
fact, I think I'd rather have that ticket than 3.5 years of vacation.
Right. Oh, yeah. It's not a vacation, dude. We're all too alpha personality. We like to work.
Right. We
Okay.
do.
And so it's not going to be on a beach sipping Mai Tais vacation. Hey,
No.
what's happening? No. But
Yeah.
you know, I was thinking also, Yah was not here or in all the time, but even though they don't know him yet, okay, knowing Dode as Elyon is gonna be pretty cool too. You know, I mean, that's
Yes.
gonna be pretty magnificent. You know, as
Yes.
Elyon,
Yes.
I mean,
And that you're proving my point by making that statement. I was going to say it and I got myself distracted. But Dode is going to be Elyon. And
mhm.
And Elyon means that it's the full implications of the influence of Almighty God. And therefore, you want to see God's fiery light, you want to see God's personality, it's going to be in his firstborn. Dode will have finally made that final transition so that he is the very influence of God. And part of our jobs is to rally behind him, to
Mhm.
Keep him as he should be. Very first thing we have to do is get Dode married well, because both Dode and his son did not do well with the girls. And
Right.
women brought him down as Adam. They brought him down as Dode. They brought him down as Solomon. And so we're going to have to do some coaching. Our king is not perfect.
Right.
Now, then that gets into a really interesting thought process, since he is representing all things pertaining to Almighty God as Elyon. And Dode won't be perfect even as he comes back as the exemplar of the covenant and the representation of God. Would it also not mean that God isn't perfect either?
Sure.
Yeah.
Perfection is completed, tamim. So you can't grow if you're completed. You know,
Correct.
You can't continue to expand and be infinite if you're completed. So sure.
Right.
Yeah.
So God will complete the job, but he is not completed. There's more to him, and there's more to us, and more to this relationship. So we're all on the move, all on the growth curve.
Yep. I'm on board with that.
That makes it actually better for all of us.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it better for God, makes it better for us, for that to be the case. And if you're mortal and you're looking up at a perfect God, it's going to scare the bejesus out of you. So, to use a term. So,
which isn't a bad thing, really, when you think about it.
Yeah, I guess, yeah. This is probably true. Well, my friend, thank you. We did start 15 minutes early. We went 6 minutes long. We're going to see what we can do in terms of a reboot, and we'll do a Luminary series. We'll see if we can get that done this morning.
Looking
we'll do
forward to it.
As we talk about, it's a triple dip today with Luminaries, and then Family Hour tonight at 6 Eastern time. So thank you, Kevin. Enjoyed it.
Absolutely.
Shabbat shalom to one and all.
Hey there, thanks for tuning in. That was Fetch. Gotta run now. Catch Yao on our next podcast.